Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So again, just massive thank you to everyone who's been watching, everyone who's subscribed. Please keep them coming in, share this video, and get these algorithms started. So if you did watch my watch my video last week, sorry, on Stephen Paul. So I spoke throughout the video on my very small connection with that case, where I had lived in the borough where it happened for quite a few years. Not long after leaving that borough, I moved to Grays in Thurrock. So this would have been in 2014. And within, I think I moved there in the March of the 2014, so the month before was when this case happened that I'm going to be talking to you about tonight. I ended up having to actually live in probably about a 20-minute walk from the flat where this happened. I know you guys are probably listening thinking that I'm talking shit. I'm honestly genuinely not. In such a small amount of time, you know, you're talking about a couple of years that I lived in close proximity of these cases. You know, it doesn't really happen, but I honestly, yeah, I don't really know what else to tell you, but it 100% happened. So today's case, I'm going to be talking to you about the death of Breck Bednar and his murderer, Lewis Daynes. So just a little backstory on Lewis. So he was born in 1995 or 1996, even though some reports are stating 1985, which would have made Lewis probably like in his late 20s at the time of this murder. But obviously we all know, and it's clarified by himself, that Lewis was actually only 18 years old when he committed this crime. So he was described to have had a really troubled life. So he was born to a single mother. Her and Lewis's father, they had split up before he was born, I think. I couldn't really find much detail on that. Lewis was then placed into care of his grandparents, and that was split between time with them and time within the care system. His mother ended up moving abroad to marry another man, which obviously isn't a great start in life for anyone, and you know, obviously it's just going to heighten a lot of resentment, a lot of anger when you're growing up, and obviously those problems are going to come to a head at some point. So in 2012, when Lewis was 16, he moved into a flat in Rosebery Road in Grays. This flat was actually owned by his grandparents, so he was allowed to stay there rent-free. And his neighbours described him as reclusive, like they barely noticed that he was living there. So he spent a wonderful lot of time within those same four walls, really. So, like I said, obviously Lewis would spend a hell of a lot of time inside his flat, and he would set up a gaming service called TeamSpeak. So he had access to a lot of servers, created these servers, and he used this as a way to talk to younger boys. So boys that were like 13, 14, and he would use this platform to play online video games with these boys. So this is where he made contact with 14-year-old Breck Bednar. And Breck lived in Caterham, which is a little village in Surrey, so that's about 30 miles away from Thurrock. So he would use this platform to basically just tell absolute bullshit about his life. Like, he would tell these boys that he was a multi millionaire. He would tell them that he owned shares in companies in New York. Told them that he had got about $2 million in Bitcoin trades, and he had actually donated that $2 million to Syrian rebels. He was also under contract with the FBI in America. So the truth of the matter was that Lewis was actually unemployed, as you can probably imagine. And he did have some skills with computer engineering, but this was never really talked about, and it wasn't clear whether he had gained this through a qualification or if he had, excuse me, if he had gained this through being self-taught. So, at the time of this case as well, Lewis was already known to Essex police, as in 2011, so around the time he was 15 years old, he was actually already in trouble with the police. A family had got in contact with him to say that he had raped their son. And it's not clear how old this boy was. Or we can assume that this boy was a lot younger. But we're going to come back onto that bit a little bit later on. So obviously, yeah, this was investigated, but it was actually dropped. Again, come back to that in a bit. But after Breck's death, obviously the family, they had got in contact with Breck's family to talk about this, and they explained that the reasons that the case was dropped was the fact that neither the police, like neither Essex police or their son's school, actually believed their story. So, like I said, Lewis was using this platform to talk to boys, and he first made contact with Breck in 2013. So a little bit on Breck, and then we'll start getting into the story of what actually happened. So Breck was born on March 17th, 1999. He was born to Barry Bednar and Lauren Lefebvre. So Barry and Lauren had actually grown up over in the USA, and they had moved to the UK in 1996. Lauren worked as a teaching assistant, and Barry was actually an oil trader. Oil trader and a shipping consultant, sorry. So it was this line of work that actually brought them over to the UK at the time, and then obviously 3 years later they went on to have their son Breck. 2002, they expanded their family a little bit more and ended up having triplets, Chloe, Carly and Sebastian. So around this time they ended up moving to Caterham in Surrey, and Breck was described as extraordinary, compassionate, caring, positive, happy-go-lucky and relaxed. And Breck was said to have been a A-grade student, and he actually attended a private school. But in his 9th year of education, he actually had to leave that school because Barry was facing financial difficulties at the time. He was living in a bedsit, and so obviously at this point, sorry, I forgot to mention that Barry and Lauren had split up. Barry had moved out of the family home, and he was now living in a bedsit. So around this time, he was facing a little bit of financial difficulty and made the decision to remove Breck out of the private school, and Breck was placed into state education. It was at this school, at his new school, sorry, that Breck actually reconnected with a lot of his old school friends from primary schools. Um, he also attended Army Training Corps as Breck had ambitions to be a pilot. And however, Lauren started noticing changes within her son in the year of 2013. He She noticed that obviously his online gaming presence started to increase, and growing a bit concerned about this, so she was requesting like simple things. So if he was on the computer, he had to leave his bedroom door open. Um, so yeah, she began getting concerned on who Brack was talking to. Um, One day, sorry, I just cough. So one day while walking past his room, Lauren said that she overheard a quite a manly voice talking through the computer, and she described this voice as very domineering, very controlling. So she obviously went in to ask Breck who he was talking to, and Breck told her that it was the person that owned the server or something, and said that his name was Lewis Daynes. So Breck got up a picture of Lewis, so I can just assume that obviously it was kind of like MSN, maybe. I'm not too sure. I'm not really au fait with that kind of thing. I can barely use YouTube best of times, but hey ho. But yeah, so Breck pulled up this picture, and Lauren described it as a very handsome-looking 13-year-old boy. But she just felt that the image that she was being shown, it did not match the voice that she was hearing. So Lauren obviously began speaking to Lewis, and she noticed that he sounded very overly confident for a guy that was claiming to be however old he was at this particular time. So she starts to quiz Breck about Lewis, and so Breck tells her that the only reason that he is there is because Lewis runs a server, and that Lewis is a tech genius, and he was teaching the others how to code and crypt, and had even offered Breck an apprenticeship at Microsoft. So when Lauren heard claims about Lewis' supposed career in New York, she started asking him questions about New York. So obviously, yeah, no, Lauren had grown up in the United States. But Lewis always was claiming to have a reason as to why he couldn't talk to her, which obviously wouldn't make any sense if this boy was constantly on this gaming platform. Then he wasn't doing anything particularly worthwhile in my eyes. But obviously, if he's grooming as Lewis was, then he's not going to try and make it easy. He's not going to sit there and voluntarily talk to the parent of the person that he's interested in. So Breck tries to reassure her that there's a trust, as Lewis had been gaming with the other boys in the server for quite a few years at this point, and that he knew the others from all the other boys he had known from school. They were his school friends. So Lauren begins to back off at this point, but Lewis then uses to interfere with Breck's home life, and he was telling Breck that he didn't need to do the housework as Lauren was requesting, didn't need to attend church, And Brecker was obviously going back and telling Lauren this, basically saying, "Oh well, Lewis said I don't need to do this. Lewis said I don't need to do that." And yeah, that one. I mean, if Lauren was my mother, I know full well what my mother would have said when I was younger. And I'd come onto her and said that she'd be like, "Well, you know, the day you start paying a mortgage and whatnot, then you've got a say in what goes on. But my house, my rules, that kind of thing." Or she would just be like, "Well, on your bike, out." Right? Yeah, she wouldn't have stood for that. But I think every parent is different. So Lauren then took away Breck's computer and limited his screen time. And Lewis had already infiltrated and found ways around this to keep his control over Breck. And Lewis had already told Breck that this was more about control than concern. And he ended up sending Breck some MP3 players to keep recordings. He had sent Breck a £600 iPhone for them to keep in contact. And then Lewis began playing like little mind games with Breck. At this point, was telling Breck that the other boys were telling him that they all hated Breck. But in truth, so the other boys were actually growing wise to Lewis. They had started to realise that obviously he was a Billy bullshitter, and they actually tried to tell Breck their concerns, how they felt, and Breck would just completely ignore these and would side with Lewis. Obviously, Lewis ended up having such full control over him at this point. So Lauren, she goes on to describe the time in late 2013. She got called into Breck's bedroom at this point, and she was presented with a 2-page manifesto that Breck claims to have typed up himself, which is basically a list of things that Breck wanted her to get on board with, and it was just basically saying a list of things that he should and shouldn't be allowed to do around the house. So like things like no housework, no going to church, everything that she stood against, and basically everything that Lewis wanted him to do. She printed out this manifesto, and she actually noticed at the bottom of it, it said at the bottom it was written and edited by Daynes. So, and then she would describe her other times walking in, and she would notice that Lewis was going quiet when she entered the room. And then by looking at the screen, and images of the Wicked Witch of the West would pop up, or images of Hitler. So I really can't imagine what was going through Lauren's mind at this point. You know, that she must have been at her wit's end, if I'm honest. So in December of 2013, Lauren ends up calling the police, and she begins detailing all of her concerns, worried that obviously Lewis is talking to a paedophile, obviously worries about Lewis grooming Breck, basically gave him a full, frank, detailed explanation, and she even gave over Lewis's name. I think at one point she mentions that Lewis was also sometimes using another name. I can't actually remember what the name was. I know it began with a H, but for the purposes of this video, I'm just going to stick to the name Lewis Daynes. Obviously that was the name that was given to him at birth, that was the name he was convicted under. The police, obviously they took all this information down, and after the phone call, about an hour later, the case was closed. No follow-up whatsoever. And all it would take for them was to type in the name Lewis Daynes on their system, and the 2011 report, because even though that case wasn't followed up either, that would still be on their system. They would only have to look at that, but obviously, yeah, nothing was done at all about this. And yeah, an hour after, they had closed the case. So Lauren then she begins to limit Breck's online presence again, and she even at points held an intervention with family and friends. And for a while, Breck began returning to himself, and unfortunately, Lewis was still trying to find ways around this, trying to find ways to worm back in. Obviously, still sending Breck expensive presents, which is obviously a very classic groomer trait. So around Christmas time that year, Lauren, she believed that Breck no longer had any sort of contact with Lewis, and actually returned all of his electrical equipment to him. Obviously, I can just imagine that it's probably a decision that she regretted, but obviously hindsight's a wonderful thing, really, and you can not help feel any sympathy for. You can't help but feel sympathy, sorry, for this lady. You know, she did everything she could. She took every avenue that she thought she could. But if you haven't got the law on your side, then there really isn't much that you can do. So around Christmas time, in early 2014, Breck gets invited onto an exchange trip to Spain, and Lewis and Breck kept in contact throughout this whole entire trip. And at some point during this trip, their relationship actually goes a little bit sour. Breck ends up uploading a picture of himself with a girl onto his Facebook account, and Lewis really isn't happy to see this. He's really, really angry with Breck, and he's calling Breck and messaging him, basically requesting that Breck takes his photo down. And Breck ends up obviously coming back to the UK, and he's picked up by his father at the airport and his siblings. So it was actually Barry's weekend to have his children. But obviously at the time he was living in a bedsit, so he was actually staying at the family home. Lauren had gone away for the weekend. And around this time, Lewis was requesting that Breck come to visit him. Breck, obviously, he tried to give his excuses as to why he couldn't, and Lewis tells him that he's a friend. So Lewis tells Breck to tell his father that he is a friend from school, and he's going to go stay there for a couple of nights or whatever. And obviously Barry ends up agreeing to this, thinking obviously that his son's going to be safe. What he didn't know is Lewis actually requested a taxi about 2 weeks before this to come pick Breck up. So this taxi ended up doing a 60-mile round trip. So obviously 30 miles to Surrey, 30 miles back. This taxi had been prepaid and pre-booked for 2 weeks at this point. So you already see the malevolent sort of nature that this man had or has. You see that obviously this whole entire thing was pre-planned, and around this time as well, Lewis began what the police described as a kill kit. He began buying things like duct tape, he was buying syringes, he bought cable ties and condoms. So 17th of February, this happened to be Lauren's birthday. So Breck finally arrives at Lewis's flat. And this is obviously the night that Lewis decides to end his life. So obviously later on that day, Breck was due to return home. And when he doesn't obviously immediately return home on the agreed time, Barry makes contact with Lauren, and they then start ringing around Breck's friends to try and see which one of them that he had stayed with that night. And while they're doing this, Breck's friends, they actually begin to receive pictures of Breck's dead body. And this was coming through on social media, it's coming through on their gaming platforms. And these friends, they actually end up making contact with Breck's brother and his sisters. And they're asking them things like, oh, is it true about your brother? Right, rest in peace, Breck. This is really sad, I can't believe this. You know, all the classic things that you would say to someone whose family member had died. So Lewis, in the meantime, he was trying to cover his tracks by changing and disposing of his clothes. He then took a shower and he submerged all of his hard drives and his phones in water as to try and destroy the evidence. At 11 a.m. that day, he finally contacts Essex police and he makes the following phone call. So I'm just going to place this on pause right now, and I'll be back in a moment. I'm just going to insert the clip of the 999 call. You will notice the sort of controlling voice that Lauren described when she first started speaking to Lewis, or overheard Lewis speaking. You'll definitely see what she means about controlling, domineering. So yeah, I'm just going to pause here, play the video. So the police arrive at Lewis's flat later on that day, and absolutely clear from the get-go that there was no evidence of self-defense. There was no evidential. It was evidently not clear, that there was no accident. Breck's wrists and ankles, they had actually been tied together, and these had been bound up with the duct tape that Lewis had bought previously. And it was evidently clear that sexual activity had taken place that night, or the night before. Breck, he had been stabbed in the back of the head, and this was close to where the brainstem would be. He then had his throat cut, as described by Lewis on the 999 call. So Lewis, obviously knowing that he's going to have this, there's no escape, no way that he's going to be able to get away with this. So he is arrested and he confesses to everything at this point. So sadly, Breck's funeral is held on the 17th of March 2014, so that would have been Breck's 15th birthday. So Lewis's trial was set to begin in November 2014, and it was described in court that Lewis, he showed absolutely no emotion whatsoever. He actually just kept his head down throughout the whole thing, and he was seen shaking his head when it was put forward that his motivation for this murder, it was led by sexual and sadist feelings. The only time he actually took issue with any of the reports was when it came forward about a police report that had been filed about his flat. And in this police report, it described his home as being very untidy, very dirty. Lewis claimed that this was absolute lies. He tried to say that at all times his home was spotless, absolutely immaculate inside and out. Any photographic evidence that the police had took would actually prove that this was the case. So, as always, though, a lot of people they expected Lewis to actually plead not guilty to the murder. So obviously they were all really surprised when he did actually plead guilty, and this was at the pre-trial. So obviously, when you do go not guilty, you ask the family have to obviously sit for a very lengthy trial, and it can be really debilitating for any family to sit through that. Luckily, Lewis seems to have grown a conscience at this point, and or whether that's just for the fact that he knows that he's not be able to get away with this. The evidence is way too much. He pleads guilty, meaning he's saving any expense of a trial. He is then sentenced on the 12th of January 2015, and he's sentenced to a life sentence with a minimum of 25 years. So that means he won't be able to apply for parole until at least 2040, I believe. Lewis will be at least in his early 40s, I believe. My maths isn't that great. If anyone wants to correct me on that, they can. But yeah, I believe he'll be in his very early 40s at the time of his potential release. It really depends on his behaviour while he's in prison. But either way, he has to serve that minimum of 25 years. So, Mrs. Justice Cox, she stated that having lured the young victim into your flat, you did murder him. You had befriended Breck through an online community, and with your contacts increasing in a very sinister way. The precise details of what happened in your flat are unclear, and these may never be known, but I'm sure this murder was driven by a sadistic or sexual motivation. Prosecutor Richard Whittam, QC, he told the court the prosecution case was that at the time of this murder, Breck was aged just 14. The law makes specific provision for the murder of a child involving sexual or sadistic motivation. The prosecution has advanced the case on that the basis and anticipation of doing that again on the date of sentence. That one didn't really make any sense to me. I'm not legally trained whatsoever, but that one really didn't make any sense to me, as I really hope that it makes a bit more sense to you guys. I'm just reading out as I found the quote. But I digress, I'll carry on. So Simon Mayo QC, he was mitigating. He said that Daynes had Asperger's syndrome, and this affects his ability to make sound judgments. Mayo also argued that there was not enough evidence to prove that the murder had been premeditated. Take me an umbrage with that, if I'm honest, because I know a few people that have Asperger's or they're on the spectrum. Yeah, they don't make the best choices, but we're human. Anyone who's not on the spectrum, we sometimes make poor choices. It's just part of being human. It really doesn't matter what if you have a mental health condition. Sorry, that does not make you go out and use that as a basis to commit murder. It really, really bores my piss when they try and put mental health as a factor. It's not a factor. You're just trying to get a lenient sentence for a very dangerous sexual paedophile predator, whatever you want to call him. So, Crown Prosecutor Jenny Hopkins, she said that our case was that Lewis Daynes, even though he was only 18 when he committed Breck's murder, was a very controlling and manipulative individual who carefully planned this crime. The degree of planning and manipulation by Daynes is shocking, and when you consider the young ages of the perpetrator and victim, it stands out as one of the most cruel, violent, and unusual cases that we have ever dealt with. So, I mean, obviously they always say these kind of things with cases that they are presented with or they're working on, but obviously I always take those kind of, not to sound heartless, but I always take those kind of quotes with a pinch of salt, because obviously in their line of work, throughout court cases, and or if you're working in the police, you are around stuff like this, or maybe worse than this, throughout your career. So like I said, I always take those quotes with a pinch of salt, if I'm honest. In November 2016, so this was about a year and a half, maybe almost 2 years into Lewis's sentence, two blogs actually appeared online, and it wasn't clear at first if they had been written by Lewis. So there's obviously a potential that Lewis has somehow got a internet device smuggled into the prison, or he's got someone on the outside to actually write these out for him. So the first one was titled "A BBC Documentary, Questions to be Asked," and the second was actually an open letter by Lewis himself. And in this letter, he stated that he didn't want to cause any further harm to Breck's family, but he wanted to make the public aware of further details, and stated that he wasn't a sexual predator and that Breck was driven away by his family, and Breck himself drew comfort from his friends and the online gaming. He went on to say that Breck was being abused by home, and this was overheard on the platform. The police were aware of Breck's supposed abuse. He then signed off this letter with an apology to Breck. So Lauren said that she reported these and to the police, and she actually asked for them to be taken down. She was told that this wouldn't be possible as the post had been put on a US platform. If anyone can highlight why that really makes a difference, then please do, because obviously, I'm not tech savvy whatsoever. So if anyone can highlight and just comment on why that is a thing, then please let me know. I would love to know. They basically just told her that she would need to contact the original poster and request for them to be removed. So Breck's siblings also said that they received messages via Snapchat, and this was stating that someone was planning to dig up Breck's body. They were going to smash up Breck's headstone and then post naked images of Breck's body online. Obviously, we can't be proven, but obviously if the police were willing to actually do their jobs, they probably could have traced these messages back and actually proved that these were coming from Lewis. And if they actually pulled their fingers out their asses, they probably could have got him an extra sentence on top of his existing sentence for malicious intent to cause harm or possibly harassment without violence. Either one, but either one would have got him an extra sentence on top. Not to mention, obviously, having access to a phone in prison. But obviously, like I said, we can't prove that this was coming from Lewis himself, or he's got someone on the outside to post this stuff for him. But either way, like I said, if the police had done their job properly, they could have traced all this and had it nipped in the bud as quick as it started. So Breck's family, they went on to establish the Breck Foundation, and this was to raise awareness of online dangers and promote responsible use of the internet. His mother was quoted by the BBC as saying, "I want Breck's tragedy to open the eyes of everyone to recognise the dangers of online predators. It is a really real danger of today, and we need to all look after each other." Lauren asked for his favourite band Coldplay to help raise awareness of the online dangers, and went on to tell ABC News, "People think it only happens to antisocial children, but it's just not true. And definitely, this sort of stuff can happen to anyone. No matter how strong-willed you think you are, this sort of stuff can really turn your life upside down." Excuse me, sorry. So Lauren also went on to call for more help from the government for online safety, saying that she expected more feedback from Surrey Police, and added, "I wasn't recommended to contact the CEOPC, so that's the Child and Exploitation Online Protection Centre." So she actually found out when it was too late that there was a really great agency who actually help parents with this kind of thing. So again, another absolute massive failing from the police at this point. I mean, where's it with the police around 2014, 2013? Did they just not want to do their jobs this year? Was it too much hard work for them, too much paperwork? Someone please let me know, because I would genuinely love to know. So after Lewis's plea in court, Assistant Chief Constable Gavin Stevens said that the handling of Breck's case by Surrey Police had been referred to the Independent Police Complaints Commission, and he stated that following Breck's death, we carried out a review of practices in all our call handling centres, and we implemented changes to improve the way information is handled and shared. Due to the prior contact, the case was referred to the IPCC. They have since decided to conduct an independent investigation into the actions taken by Surrey Police following this communication. So, according to ABC News, the family actually filed a lawsuit against Essex and Surrey Police over the handling of the case. And in March 2016, they actually accepted a settlement in which Surrey Police apologised for their mishandling of the case. And Breck's family were awarded compensation. So after obviously all this happens, as always with stories like this, it gets made into TV dramas, made into documentaries. I know that Emma Kenny, if you watch her channel, obviously she's done a really good deep dive on this story. I just wanted to tell it because of my very small connection to this case. But she obviously done a really, really good deep dive on this story. So she's actually worked with Lauren and actually presented a couple of documentaries on this case. But on the 26th of January 2016, the BBC Three, they broadcast a drama documentary about the murder, and this was entitled "Murder in Gaines: The Life and Death of Breck Bednar." In March 2018, in the US, the story was depicted on the Investigation Discovery Channel in the Dangerous Game episode of the Web of Lies series. And in 2015, Breck's death was featured in the US series Stalkers Who Kill in the episode titled Babyface Killer. So, obviously, you look at the thumbnail image of Lewis Daynes, you will notice why he was actually called that. I mean, looking at that image myself, genuinely, I cannot believe that I'm looking at someone who at that time was 18. I look at the pictures of when I was 18, and I looked a lot older than by 18 years. So he definitely was a little babyface killer. There's no doubt about it. You know, you look at that picture and you do think about 13, 14. In 2019, a new play was written by Mark Wheeler, and this was using the words of his friends and family, and tells the story of how a teenager was groomed online, and this play was called Game Over. So obviously massively influenced by Breck's story. So again, just thank you for listening. Obviously, not as long as last week's one, because obviously we're only focusing on the one crime in this case. But obviously, I decided to do these two cases together, mainly because of, like I said, obviously the very small connections between the two that I had, but also just to highlight the massive failings of the police, and the fact that obviously both of these crimes were committed in a very small amount of time frame, a very close time frame. So obviously, case of Lewis, case of Stephen. So I will be back next week with another true crime story. If there's any that you guys want me to cover, please drop in a comment, share, like, and subscribe. You can also follow me on Instagram, and you can DM me any suggestions, whatnot, or whatever you fancy. But I really appreciate, obviously, all the views, all the subscribers that I've already got, and I'm looking forward to seeing this channel grow. But thank you for your time tonight, guys. I really hope you enjoyed, and I will see you soon.